So this revision video is going to look at the market. So as part of that, we'll be looking at conducting startup market research, understanding markets, and also locating the business. So once again, there isn't going to be a great deal of content on the slides. It's more me recapping what we've done previously. So you need to have your notes in front of you. And I'm also going to ask you some questions at the end, which will hopefully target your revision. So first of all then, conducting startup market research. So you must be able to define what we mean by market research. And this is the process of gathering data on potential customers. That's all you need to know. This research can provide information on the buying habits, the lifestyle, and also the perceptions of actual customers that the business has now and potential customers that they might want to get in the future. Market research involves one or more of the following. So analysis of market potential for existing products, forecasting likely demand for new products, sales forecasting for all products, a study of market trends, a study of market characteristics, and also an analysis of market shares. So remember, we can split it into primary market research and secondary market research. The key phrase or the definition for primary research is the collection of information for the first time for a specific purpose. It can be expensive and time consuming to collect primary research, but it should be accurate and precisely what the firm requires. Primary research entails asking customers questions directly. This type of research can be carried out through surveys. So these may be on a face-to-face interview. There might be a questionnaire somewhere like in the high street or in a shop, but they also might be done by telephone or by post. It can be done through observation, which involves watching people in a variety of circumstances. So this could provide info on how customers might react to in-store displays or price changes or the location of products. It might be through panels or group discussions, so detailed questions are put to a small number of consumers. These are frequently used to discover consumers' attitudes to new products. They can also be used to collect information on changing consumer tastes and behaviour over time. And finally, for primary research, we might use test marketing. So this might allow producers to try out a product on a very small scale before launching it to the whole market. Test marketing allows firms to iron out major faults in products before incurring the expense of a full launch. And then there's secondary research, which the definition we need is the collection of data that already exists and has been used for another purpose. It's relatively cheap to gather, but also might be out of date or fail to meet the business's precise needs. So there's three basic sources, or three sources we can get that from. So official data, so from governments or other agencies. So example, the Department for Business and Innovation and Skills. These produce vast amount of information on businesses. You can also buy things called the Annual Abstract of Statistics from the government. We might get this information from trade associations and trade journals who supply valuable and specific information on things like market trends. And also, especially now, we can use the internet to access vast amounts of information about different markets and consumer behaviour. Okay, so that's market research in itself. That can provide, if you remember, quantitative and qualitative data. Remember, quantitative is a number because it almost spells quantity. Qualitative gives more detailed information on the reasons behind the numbers. So qualitative market research, the definition for that, research into the attitudes and opinions of customers that influence their purchasing behaviour. It's designed to cover the attitudes and opinions of customers that influence their purchasing behaviour, as I say, but also reveals the reasons why consumers behave in particular ways, allowing businesses to design products that are more appealing to them. Qualitative research is based on the views of a relatively small number of people and uses techniques such as consumer panels or focus groups. It's usually an expensive form of marketing. Next, let's look at quantitative research. So the definition that we need here is the collection of information on consumer views and behaviour that can be analysed statistically. So whereas qualitative market research discovers why, this type of research discovers how many. It provides information on estimated sales, the size of the market, and the price that customers or consumers are willing to pay. Quantitative research can be conducted both through primary and secondary research. Okay, the next thing we need to include when we're looking at market research is sampling. So a business will not collect information from all its potential customers because that would be far too expensive and far too time consuming, especially for a small new startup business, which, if you remember, that's what BUSS1 is about. Firms need to select a sample that is representative of the whole target market. That target market we call the population. So the definition of sampling that we need is that it's the selection of a representative group of consumers from a larger population. It's not enough to know all the different types of market research and the different types of sampling. You need to be able to make some assessment of their value in particular circumstances. So you need to say, in the case study that we're talking about, this method would fit this situation and for these reasons. So there are a number of ways that samples can be collected. So first is random sampling. This is when each member of the population has an equal chance of being included. This is appropriate when a firm is researching a product aimed at a large target group. So computers are often used to select people at random. We might use a stratified random sample, which separates the population into segments or strata or layers, if you like. This approach can avoid bias by ensuring that the composition of the sample accurately reflects that of the entire population. And then there's also quota sampling, which splits the population into a number of groups, each sharing common characteristics. So, for example, a survey might be conducted on the views of women regarding a new product, and the number of interviewees in each category could be clearly set out. This saves money by limiting the number of respondents. There are obviously factors which influence the choice of sampling method that we will choose. The most obvious factor affecting the choice is the amount of finance that we have available. Businesses with larger marketing budgets will spend more and conduct research using larger samples. So if you think about it, market research involves a big trade-off between cost and accuracy. Firms require accurate information on which to base their decisions on, such as how much they should charge, what the design of their product should be like, the type of promotion they should use, and who they should be aiming their product at. So the greater the amount of information collected, the more reliable it should be, but also the greater the cost of it to the company. So many newly established businesses, remember these are what we're looking at, have limited budgets, yet accurate market information is invaluable in aiding their decision making. So firms face a further dilemma. Even extensive and costly market research cannot guarantee unbiased data, because simply respondents don't always tell the truth and samples do not reflect the entire population. So you've got to cross-reference different types of research, and obviously sometimes the entrepreneur has to use his gut instinct or her ability to guess what's going on. So it's not always based on figures. Don't think that simply stopping every person in the street will give you a random sample. This will only give you a sample of people who are in the street at the time. Selecting random samples needs to be very carefully planned. So if you asked the opinion of people in Newcastle on a Saturday afternoon, there's a good chance that those people, if you're standing in, say, Stowell Street, will have just come from the match. So that won't be necessarily representative. So when assessing the sampling methods that a business could use, you've got to be able to consider the cost of the chosen approach against the expected benefits. So some questions to test yourself on this topic. First of all, a simple one. I want you to draw out a table setting out the advantage and disadvantage of each method of primary research. Then I want you to explain the difference between qualitative and quantitative market research And I want you to support that with some examples of situations where they might be appropriate. And then I want you to explain why a business might use sampling and explain the difference between a random sample and a quarter sample. So let's look at understanding markets. So first of all, let's look at the different types of market. First definition we need though is what actually a market is. So it's a place or a means by which buyers and sellers come together to decide prices and exchange information. Some markets exist in specific places, such as, the big market in Newcastle used to be the big market. It's obviously not a marketplace as such now, but that's what it was named after. Others are conducted through the telephone or electronically, things like eBay. But we did break down different markets, so let's go through what those are. So there are local markets which exist for goods and services that it's not feasible to travel far, so hairdressers for instance. There are national markets, so things that are sold throughout the UK. So some small drinks manufacturers for instance might sell their drinks only in the UK. There might be a physical market, so these are markets that have specific locations, so literally a market. Or there might be a particular type of market that appeals to lots of different people. So in London, for instance, if you go to Petticoat Lane, there's particular types of market that appeal to people who are interested in vintage clothing, for instance. They are also electronic markets. So the internet, for instance, operates as a market for many small businesses, enabling them to reach a wider customer base. So eBay or Amazon Marketplace. And then there are also industrial markets. This is where businesses sell products to other businesses. This is where the phrase business to business comes from, or you might see it written as B2B. Now let's look at the idea of demand. Now the definition of demand is the quantity of a good or service that a customer wishes to buy over a certain period at a given price. A sufficient level of demand is essential for new businesses because without it, not enough business will be generated, so there'll be not enough cash inflow to pay the bills as they become due, and in the longer term it might mean the business is unlikely to make profit. A business plan should contain evidence that there will be sufficient demand for the new enterprise's products. There's a couple of major influences on demand, so let's look at those. First of all, the actions of a competitor. If a new business's competitors react to its arrival in the market by reducing their prices or advertising more or introducing a special offer, it will be more difficult for the new business to attract sufficient demand. Consumer income will also have an impact because a new business selling jewellery or hot tubs might find that its sales depend on levels of consumer income. If people have a low amount of income, then they're not necessarily going to go out and buy a hot tub. And then the seasonal factors as well. So a new ice cream shop, for instance, will expect higher sales in the summer, especially a hot summer, so opening a business in the wrong time of the year might mean low levels of demand. Good decisions by entrepreneurs can help create demand for products. So setting the price, for instance, is very important. High prices might result in few customers, but if the price is too low, the business might not receive enough revenue to actually pay its costs. So entrepreneurs should set a price that represents good value, but also takes into account prices charged by competitors. When you look at the case study, it's really important that you think about what type of product the business is planning to sell and whether the demand is going to be seasonal. Loads of people ignore this and therefore fail to think about the fact that this may result in low cash inflows during certain periods of the year, which will obviously have a huge impact on how successful the business might be and whether it's even going to survive. Demand for the business's products also depend on the amount of and effectiveness of the business's advertising. So effective advertising makes customers aware of products and therefore boosts demand. Right, next thing we'll look at is segmentation. So market segmentation, a definition, dividing a market into identifiable sub-markets, each with its own customer characteristics. So market segmentation involves, as I say, dividing the market up into chunks. So for instance, a brewery might sell to males aged 18 to 30. So segments might be based on differences in demographics, so how old we are, our gender, what class we're in. Something called psychographics, so our attitudes and our tastes, or very simply geography. So people in the northeast might buy slightly different things to people in the southwest. The reason that businesses split us up into segments is that it allows different marketing techniques and different types of marketing ideas to be used. It can therefore possibly lead to increased profit from each segment. It also means that we can assist in identifying new marketing opportunities because we're not just assuming that everyone wants the same thing. It also means it's easier for us to reflect consumer tastes as well because we know what those tastes are. Let's break it down into different types of market segmentation very quickly. So we could break down in terms of age. So fashion and music tend to be targeted at very different types of customer. There's gender. So for instance, you won't catch very many males reading Cosmopolitan magazine. Family size. So breakfast cereals might be sold in different sizes depending on different amount of children or adults in the family. Lifestyle segmentation, or that psychographic segmentation we're talking about. So it might be that training shoes, for instance, is a good example of that. We have training shoes that you would actually go running in, or training shoes that you just wear for the purposes of fashion. We could segment in terms of social class because we know that we can roughly guess someone's income based on that. We looked at ACORN, so classification of residential neighbourhoods. That breaks the UK down into 150 different types of dwelling, which helps us work out what type of person might live there. So it helps people sending junk mail out. And also we might break it down as break a market down according to education. So say for instance newspaper readership might be different depending on what type of education you have. Then we looked at market size, market growth and market share. So market size, if you remember, is the total demand for a particular product. It can be measured by volume and by value as well. To work out market value, if you remember, it's the selling price or the average selling price times by however many things are sold. So if the average selling price is £90, for instance, and the number sold is 1,000, then you know that the total value of the market is 90,000. Market growth takes place when the size of the market increases, or if it's negative growth when it decreases. It's normally measured in terms of percent. So in order to work that out, you would need to divide the change in market size by the original market size, then times by 100. Obviously it's a percentage. So the change in market size divided by the original market size times by 100. That would give you market growth. Market share. So that's a percentage of total sales in a market achieved by one specific firm. So if a particular business has annual sales of £1.9 million and the market share is £19 million, then it's obviously got a market share of 10%. We work that out by the business's sales divided by total sales times by 100. If a market increases in size over a year and the business's sales rise more slowly over that time or even fall, then the business's market share will fall. In contrast, if the business's sales increase more rapidly than the market has grown, then its market share will obviously rise. Market share is an important measure of a firm's success in a market. Rising market share is therefore a target for many businesses because it will probably say that they're being successful. It's very important that you understand and are able to calculate market size, market growth and market share. They very often come up. They're also based on percentages, so make sure you're happy with these calculations here but also percentage change. So the percentage change, remember, is change over original times by 100. Okay, some questions to ask yourself on that topic. Again, draw up a table and show me 5 different types of market that might exist. You should include an explanation of each type of market and 2 examples of firms that sell in that market. Tell me why demand is an important factor for new businesses. So make a list of the actions that the entrepreneur could take to encourage higher demand. Draw me a mind map or do a list of 7 ways in which a business might segment its market. Remember, you're doing all this without looking at the video or your notes. And then write down the formulae to calculate market share and market growth. List 2 factors that might cause a business's market share to rise and 2 that might cause it to fall. And finally, for this one, let's look at locating the business. So a definition for location, if you want it, is the place or places in which a business is based. Most businesses seek locations that will help them to make profits, and for new businesses, remember that's what we focus on for BUSS1, a good location is vital to survive the vulnerable first few months of trading. So entrepreneurs will consider a lot of different factors, and let's have a look at what they might be. So the market. A business needs to be located near its customers to make it as easy as possible for them to use their services or to buy its products. So for instance, if you were opening up a restaurant, you'd want it to be located near a busy area where people would walk past. They need to look at competition. So it's common for estate agents, for instance, to locate close to one another because consumers wanting to purchase a house are likely to visit all of the local agents. An agent that locates elsewhere might miss out on potential customers. There's infrastructure. So some businesses require good transport links to operate effectively. So therefore, a business that relies on the delivery of bulky or heavy products might want to be near a good road or near a train station, or not a train station, but near railway siding. They'll need to think about technology because a lot of people, for instance, work from home. So writers and artists do this. So a high-speed internet connection might be vital. They also need to think about climate and natural resources. It's very important for some industries such as tourism and agriculture. So a seaside hotel targeting families will obviously want to be located near the sea. Suppliers. Some businesses will need to be close to their suppliers. So if you are a business that sells fresh fish, you'll want to be close to a fishing port. Obviously, business need to think about costs. So most businesses that we're thinking about, remember BUSS1, won't have a great deal of capital. And in addition to that, they'll want to minimise their costs to help generate profits. And also there are qualitative factors as well. So most of the factors that I've told you about are to do with maximising revenue or minimising cost. But some entrepreneurs refer to things like being near friends or family or being somewhere like in the countryside because they want to enjoy it. That's one of the reasons why they've chosen to be self-employed. What can influence these factors? Well, retail businesses, for instance, are strongly influenced by the market and something that we call footfall. So they need to be in a location where there are plenty of customers passing by and possibly in an area that is known for that type of business. The market is also important in determining the location of other business services. So for instance, it's common to find hairdressers and beauty therapists in similar areas and also in areas where there's large footfall. Businesses in the primary sector are heavily influenced by natural factors. So a fruit farm will want to be located somewhere with an appropriate climate. Manufacturing, however, will depend heavily on suppliers and therefore want to locate close to them. So it might be especially true if the supplies are heavy or bulky, expensive to transport, or have a short shelf life. So for instance, a cider maker is likely to site its business near to somewhere that has apple orchards. It's probably cheaper to transport the finished cider to the market than to transport a large amount of apples. So these are a few general influences that I'm trying to give you the idea to help you think about the precise needs of a business when deciding on a location. Each location is different and needs to be judged independently. So all you're thinking about if you get asked a question on location, is the location suitable and why? Couple of questions to help you sum that up. So compile a list of maybe 8 factors that will influence the location of a new business. And then I want you to identify 4 locational factors that will be most important for, say, a takeaway restaurant and a farm growing fruit such as strawberries.